In higher ed, we are all looking for big wins, but reducing a 75% application abandonment rate and achieving a 90% conversion rate, that's next level transformation. Michael Bettersworth, CMO at Texas State Technical College, shares how they achieved this by streamlining the application process with Element 451.
Our Element journey began out of a necessity. We were switching to a new SIS, and the application process was going to pose some real usability issues for us. We felt that application was going to hamper our enrollment. So we began quickly to evaluate different CRMs, different applications. So for context on that, our conversion rate with the prior application had about 75% abandonment of people clicking apply to submit. And the first weeks after going live with Element, we saw an 80% conversion, and that's now up to 90. So improving the usability of that application on the front-end process has had a significant advance in our intake.
When technology works for students, it works for you. Visit element451.com to see how simplifying the application process with artificial intelligence will lead to significant results for your institution. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Hidden Gem podcast. And I am your host, Maya Demishkevich. And today we're exploring a unique perspective on community college marketing. If you ever wondered what community colleges can learn from private universities or vice versa, that's the topic of today's episode. Joining me is Rebecca Oliver, Senior Executive Director of Strategic Communications at North Shore Community College. Rebecca recently transitioned from working in private universities, including Boston University, to the world of community colleges. And with experience on both sides, she brings a fresh perspective on marketing strategies, audience engagement, and the critical role community colleges play in higher education. So we'll talk about the shift from recruitment-driven marketing to retention-focused strategies, how free tuition programs are reshaping perceptions, and much more. So if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share it with your colleagues. We would really appreciate it. Okay, let's get started. Welcome to The Hidden Gem, your go-to podcast that shines a spotlight on the strategic role of marketing and communications in shaping the future of community colleges. I'm your host, Maya Demishkevich, CMO at Carroll Community College. Every week, I sit down with community college leaders and industry experts to unpack strategies that work. We'll discuss practical insights and success stories to help you elevate your institution's profile and achieve your strategic goals. Tune in to amplify your community college's success, one conversation at a time. The Hidden Gem is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. And let's get started. Rebecca, welcome to the Hidden Gem podcast. I'm very excited to have you as a guest.
Thank you for having me.
I honestly really looking forward to our conversation today because I always enjoy speaking to Marcom professionals and really any professionals who are new to the community college world, because I feel like it's so easy to get into the mindset of we've always done it this way the longer you stay in higher ed or any sector, and to stay more narrow focused, and not look outside the industry. So talking to newcomers like you who bring fresh perspectives can really help us challenge ourselves and look at our approaches in a slightly different way. So I am super excited to learn from you and what you have observed in your first year at North Shore Community College, which for those who don't know, it's located in Massachusetts. So what I wanted to start with is by asking you to briefly share your experience working in higher education and maybe your journey before you got to North Shore.
Briefly, out of grad school, I worked for a couple of nonprofits, but for the most part of my professional career, it's always been in higher ed. I got into the marketing area of higher ed through managing websites. And so everything that I do in marketing and communication is always about the digital focus and the user funnel that way. And what is the best first representation and the more sort of permanent representation of how we can show who we are. So I'm always thinking about websites. I'm always thinking about Google searches. I'm always thinking about how people get to where we are. And that's your first impression. So a lot of focus on that.
Mm-hmm. So where did you work before North Shore?
I worked at Boston University.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked at LaSalle University in Newton, Massachusetts. So between those, we're talking really large private in the middle of Boston to a relatively smaller private just in the outskirts of Boston to now a public community college with 2 campuses in cities. So, sort of running the gamut of what I'm looking at and who would be a prospective student for those campuses is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's great that you have a lot of experience and you bring this to North Shore. I'm sure they are lucky to have you. So you've been there for a year now. So it's a recent transition from a private to a public institution. So I'm curious, what are some of the key differences you have noticed as you join the community college community? What have you noticed?
The first thing, anyone transitioning from a private mentality or a private sort of industry into the community colleges, and I mean this in the best way, there's a lot more bureaucracy because there's a lot more eyes on what you're doing and oversight. So that I'm getting used to a little bit. But in terms of marketing and higher ed, the biggest difference has been knowing who your audience is. In private, there's this constant hustle for the prospective student. In community colleges, there's still that hustle, but your geo is pretty small. So they already likely know who you are. They already likely know what you offer and why you would go there. And so the marketing voice is a little bit different in that it's further down the funnel. So the biggest difference is if you're looking at things in terms of retention and recruitment is more private, retention is more public. And so shifting, you still have that marketing voice, but it's almost as though you're introducing yourself to someone that has done a really deep dive on you already in the public sector. So it's a little bit different. And then our sort of revenue streams are those students are already coming in, they already know who we are. So we're looking a lot at workforce development too, which is a pretty big thing that privates are pivoting to, but that has been foundational to community colleges for years. But in both instances, they're trying to ramp it up, but community colleges have a bit of a leg up on that. So it's making sure that brand, that impression is not different for a workforce development perspective collaboration as it would be for the student. Mm-hmm. So making sure that we are true to who we are across who we're speaking to.
Yeah, that's interesting. With the enrollment cliff coming, privates are gearing up and, recognize that there is an opportunity in workforce development. So I anticipate them adding more and more programs. So we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. The enrollment cliff was always kept hearing about it. 2025. We're here now. So being in the private right now, I imagine is pretty stressful. And then just to really kick them when they're down, then free community college rolls out. So the enrollment cliff is, I think, incredibly frightening for the privates. And that was something that you were always hearing about, that 2025 cliff. Now, community colleges also are free for the first 2 years to get your associates. So it's even more terrifying to be in a private fighting that community colleges already have a leg up on the workforce relationships and now free community college. But both of those things working for a public now is really exciting to get out there and talk about. And now community college should be part of the natural discussion when you're talking about getting a bachelor's. Because the largest issue with privates and most higher ed any bachelor's degree is the cost. We know that's the largest barrier to entry. And now community colleges are saying, well, we've always had these really highly skilled offerings for you, and now you can get it for free and then spend your money just on those last 2 years getting your bachelor's. So it's an exciting time to be at a community college.
So what type of response are you seeing to the free community college offering? We don't have it in the state of Maryland, so we're in a slightly different situation. We do have dual enrollment that is right now being offered at no cost to high school students, but we don't offer degree programs at no cost. So I'm curious, like, what is the response rate from the community? Are you seeing higher demand? Is there maybe a perception that it's devaluing education? Like, maybe it's people are thinking maybe it's even worse than, I don't know, since now it doesn't cost anything.
Right. I mean, you get what you pay for, right?
Right.
Surely it can't be of high quality.
Yes.
I mean, it's paid for by the millionaire's tax in Massachusetts, so there's plenty of money there. And this is why I like marketing and communication, is that you're kind of 1 foot in the jargon, in the back end of things, and 1 foot always with the consumer on the other side. So how free community college is being seen from the inside is, oh my God, we're at about 40% new apps coming into the spring semester. It's an insane amount. And so everyone's really taxed with what they're doing. And then on the outside, it's free community college. It's incredibly exciting. We have 40% new apps coming in. So trying to find that balance with the general idea of retention being the largest issue with community college as opposed to recruitment, making sure that those students stay and they get that high quality education. Anyone taking on 40%, it's going to be quite the challenge, but we're ready for it. We knew it was coming, but can you ever really be prepared for 40% increase in students? So it's a challenge, but not one that we're slacking on. We are addressing the issues and we're up for it. So I just hope that those students that are taking advantage of the free community college are doing so thoughtfully, because while it's free, it is still a taxing degree. It still costs your time. It still costs your effort. You still have to miss that shift at work in order to go. You still have to miss that dinner in order to write that paper. So there is a strong cost involved, if not directly dollar to dollar. So that's also the message that we're trying to explain to make sure people really know what they're getting into.
I would be curious to see what the retention looks like in a couple of years, because I do feel like anytime you offer anything for free, it's exciting and it's easy to get in, but you got to work for it to stay in it, right? And sometimes when you don't have the skin in the game, like the financial component, it might be easier for you to give up. I don't know. I'm curious to see how that works out.
And it's not free. You take one class and that's paid for. You do have to commit to, I believe it's 15 credits. I'm not entirely sure. Forgive me for that data point, but you do have to commit to doing it in a timely manner. And the idea of measuring community colleges retention is always difficult too, because we're used to that 4-year retention mark, as opposed to community college where, people will do what they can and get that degree, but it might just take them a lot longer.
Okay, so that's an interesting observation. So kind of shifting from enrollment focus to more of a retention focus to keep those students engaged and retained. Focus on workforce development compared to what you've done in privates. What else have you noticed? Any other differences outside of bureaucracy, of course?
There's a different type of bureaucracy. I think the other two biggest things are the tone of voice in our marketing material, and from the communication side of things, what is newsworthy. So the tone of voice, marketing 101, right? You find your voice and you stick to it. But if I'm a private and I'm trying to find those students, I know 80% come from our backyard, but there's still that rather large 20% that could come from anywhere. And so the language that you use has to be a little bit more neutral. You can't slip into colloquialisms. There's a generic aspect that's done there. But when you're at community college, you can speak a little bit more to your neighbor. And I think perhaps that's where the community college can get a little bit of a bad rap. You can speak more freely, more directly. We already know what the issues are, and we're going to hit them right in the material right away. So finding that tone of voice, I've had to sort of break it down a little bit myself. Everyone else gets it. I'm still trying to sort of shake off that private neutrality. And that's been fun. And then also, what is newsworthy? We would never put out a press release in one of the privates because we got a new provost. Maybe we would, but unlikely. What we would do is try to save any capital we have for a really big news story. And we try to find them in the community and pitch them. But here, a new provost is great news and really important to that community that the provost is from, or that local newspaper in our backyard. And so and that is marketing too, even more so than if you're hitting a national news in the private. So we're not just the Institute of Higher Ed that happens to be in this community. We are the Institute of Higher Ed for that community. And so what we do is integral to the newsworthiness of what's going on around us. And that's also been a little eye-opening that, oh, I'm so thrilled that you bit at that press release. I'm so glad we put that out there. What I would expect to be picked up wouldn't, and yet you did, and it is newsworthy. I'm thrilled that you see the value in it. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun getting to know the local reporters and pitching those ideas.
Struggling to make sense of endless research? At the AI Engage Summit, you will get hands-on tutorials and meet Notebook LM, Google's AI assistant that transforms complex information like academic papers and lecture videos into content that will engage your target audience. The event is free and virtual, so register now at enrollify.org/engage. That's great. I'm glad they're picking up your press release and sharing the news, because I feel like as a community, they know each other. They want to know what's going on and where did they go to school? Where did they transition? They got a promotion. It's so exciting because it's almost like a family, but it's just a bit bigger.
I went to school with him. He was in my school. Yeah.
So, well, thanks for sharing your insights about your first year experience at a community college. I'm curious, based on your past experience and where you are now, what are some of the practices or strategies that you think community colleges could actually learn from private universities and maybe use them to enhance their outreach and their impact?
Yeah, going off of what's newsworthy, I do think that there is probably more newsworthiness coming out of the privates that I just wish that local media would pick up. And not just look in Massachusetts, especially. It's really easy to overlook all of the other 5,000 colleges that are kicking around and just look at those top tier ones. There's so much great information coming out of the community colleges. So that's just a lesson I would like the media to pick up on for community colleges. Don't sleep on us. There's good stuff coming out. But in terms of what I've learned on either end of it, I think publics can learn a lot from privates in terms of that ROI hustle about especially marketing dollars, but also budget and bandwidth. Where should the marketing and communication efforts be put based on the return of that student that will retain? And that's constantly being thought of in private because, especially an enrollment-driven institution, that dollar has to go to another dollar. And I do think there needs to, publics can be a little bit more strategic about that. So I look forward to bringing that mentality more into community college. And now the privates can learn a great deal from publics in that, my experience, there's been not a hard and fast line, but a very much passing of the baton once a student applies, or rather when they enroll. And then it's everyone else's. They're creating the materials, they're communicating, they're doing all of that. And there is something to be said for that. However, then you lose that voice that that student learnt from and that student comes to expect. And now it's a different voice. In community colleges, we don't have that luxury to hand off to someone else. We're with you the whole way. And again, oftentimes you already know who we are, so you know our voice, but the voice of marketing and communication goes a lot farther down that funnel. And I think the privates could learn from that. I think you just create a much stronger relationship with the student. There's a trust there that's built, an expectation. And, one of the major reasons I love marketing and communication is I just love simplifying things. And when you get further in the funnel, that's when you start over-explaining things because you're explaining the exception to the rule and getting into the nitty-gritty and this and that. But if you have a marketing perspective, oftentimes you can go, let's still give them the information for the 90%. And then if they have follow-ups, then you can get into that one-on-one, as opposed to this massive email with all of the different caveats. There's still a beauty and simplification of message that marketers bring when they're a lot further down the funnel that at privates, oftentimes that doesn't happen.
Yeah. So going back to the hustle and the return on investment, when I got to community college, and I used to work before that for a 4-year institution and then for a for-profit online university. So it's a completely different. But when I got to community college, one of the things that I noticed is the marketing function was kind of underutilized and is not seen as a strategic function. And at first I was thinking, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not educating them enough. Maybe I'm not doing something right. But over time, I realized, and I'm curious to see maybe if you feel the same way, that it wasn't about me. It was actually a structural differences. And that goes back to, in a private institution, success hinges directly on marketing and enrollment numbers, right? And if they don't hustle, if they don't use the money in the right way, the institution is going to go out of business, right? So marketing is a huge focus of those private institutions. In the community college setting, our funding comes from so many different sources. Well, in your case, it's 100% free. So it comes from county and the state, and then a percentage of it is from student tuition, but it's not the main source of revenue. So I think that's where it comes from, because they're not dependent necessarily on that tuition coming in. The function is not as developed or seen as strategic. That's kind of my perception of what I've observed over the last few years.
Yeah. Marketing it's often ignored, but first to blame. And so I'm really lucky that my college shifted the idea of marketing and communication under an umbrella of strategic communication. Any content that's created for media, for the website, naturally is part of marketing. Any marketing material, any of that content could naturally be part of communication. So that makes sense for it to be all under one umbrella. Yeah, the hustle of getting, if one program dips down, well, what was our marketing material? But, there's never a natural relationship there because that hustle perhaps doesn't have to be there. But yeah, I think that is the biggest difference, is that you're counting every single dollar that comes in on the private, but the public, it's generally always going to be there.
Anything else you think we can learn from privates?
I mean, I loved my time in private, but I'm excited to see where we can go with public, because I just think it's a bit of a hidden gem.
That's the name of my podcast.
There you go.
I do agree that we are, in a way, a hidden gem, and I want people to stop calling us the hidden gem.
Right. We're not the best kept secret. I want to
We're
see
not.
I'm proud and a very viable, realistic option. I'm thrilled if and when community colleges are naturally a part of the discussion about where to go after high school, not as a second choice or a situation requires it. But no, especially in Massachusetts, think financially. This makes the most sense. And you're getting high quality education through that, setting you up for even greater success when you launch into a 4-year, if that's what you want. Oftentimes associates are seen as enough, and that you have to go to that. We are giving you everything you need. If you want to pursue it, we're going to set you up for success. If you don't, you have the skills to stay exactly and do exactly what you want. So
Well, it sounds like you're doing great because you're able to get 40% more applications. So let's hope all of those students retain and go out there and become successful in your community.
Doing my success data because, well, my first year here, we're up 40%. Well, that wasn't me, but I'll use it. It's an exciting time. I do also look forward to the retention data and seeing what we can do to make sure those students stay with us.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll circle back in a year or so and learn about the retention strategies you were able to kind of implement as you work on it. So, well, Rebecca, it was very insightful, and I appreciate you sharing about your first year experience in the community college sector. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Maya.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable. Let's keep this conversation going on LinkedIn at Maya Demishkevich. I would love to hear your thoughts, questions, and suggestions for what you would like to see next on this podcast. Remember, by tuning in to The Hidden Gem, you're not just listening to a podcast. You are joining a movement of amplifying community colleges' success. Don't miss out. Subscribe to this podcast and notifications about our future episodes. Share it with your colleagues and college leaders to help make our colleges stand out. Together, let's make an impact. The Hidden Gem is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you will like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher education technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Jenny Fowler, Eddie Francis, Brian Gross, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.